In this video, we're going to see if these three Pro Acryl shades are the absolute best shades you can get for painting your miniatures. Let's get painting. To do this, I'm going to need a little bit of help. I'm going all the way back to 7th edition and my bits box with some Kit Bash Space Marines. So we're going to try these shades over gold, over red, blue, silver, and a really dodgy yellow colour that I airbrushed a little bit too fast, so it's turned out a bit blotchy. Now, full disclosure, I have bought these shades myself. I was put onto them by a friend who said they're the best thing since sliced bread. So I thought, let's run some tests and I will share my results with you, the viewer. The first thing I want to do before I address the coloured models is try these in a little bit of a test environment and compare them against the new Games Workshop shades and the Army Painter Quick shades. To do this, I have put one shoulder pad per shade colour onto a little bit of sticky back tape, and I've sprayed it all with Pro Acryl white primer. So the first part of this test is very simply to take one of each manufacturer's colours and paint them over these shoulder pads and see how they go on. So let's start off with the Pro Acryl black shade. Now this applies fairly well, but it does leave a little bit of a mess and staining on the shoulder pad even when I clean the brush off to draw it away. The Games Workshop Null Oil seems to be much better, and it goes into those recesses and really pulls away from those raised areas without too much effort. Now I am going to clear it away from the top like I did with the Pro Acryl, but generally this seems to be settling a bit better. As for the Army Painter, this is going on very heavily indeed, so again I'm going to clear it off from those raised areas and I'm going to pull it down into the recesses, and we'll see how it dries later in the video. We're going to do exactly the same with the brown shade from Pro Acryl next, and I will show you some in-focus shots of this, I promise, later on, but the camera was focused on my hand, not the shoulder pad, but it goes on very much the same way as the black. I'm quite happy, however, with how this is settled in the recesses and how easy it is to pull it away from those raised areas and get a decent finish. Moving on to Agrax Earth Shade from Games Workshop. Again, this is going on very nicely and doing exactly what it is supposed to do and what the new formulation of shade is designed to do and how it's meant to work. As for the Army Painter, again, this is looking a little bit heavy in terms of its application, but we will see how it dries and settles later on. Again, with all three colours, I've applied it, I've cleaned my brush, and I've soaked up some of the wash from those raised areas just to get it focused in the recesses and see what the staining is like. The last colour is going to be the Flesh Wash, and very much like the other washes, this applies quite nicely from the Pro Acryl and it does go into those recesses. Now I do need to again go in and take up some of the excess that has got started to pool on the top of the shoulder pad, but generally this flows quite nicely. The Reichland Flesh shade from Games Workshop again works exactly the same as the other two washes and works exactly as it's designed to, pulling into those recesses and leaving minimal staining on the top of the shoulder pad. Finally, we've got the Flesh shade from Army Painter, and I guess one thing it's worth noticing here is it is a slightly different colour, whereas the other two are quite reddy. This one has more of a lean towards brown, I guess, than that kind of more reddy Reichland and Flesh shade from Pro Acryl. And again, it applies quite heavily, cleaning it off the top. It does settle in the recesses, so we'll let all those dry properly. We're going to go and have a look at painting this on actual models next, but so far I'm not 100% convinced on the Pro Acryl, and I think the Games Workshop shades are probably edging it just a little bit. Let's try these washes over some models then, so that we can see how they react with different paints, and we're also going to paint the Games Workshop shades on the other half of this model as well. So we'll put the Pro Acryl on one side and the Games Workshop on the other. We're starting off with a silver base. This is dark aluminium from Metal Colour by Vallejo, and we're going to apply the Pro Acryl black shade over the one side. Now this goes on really nicely, it goes into the recesses really nicely, it flows really nicely as well. I really like how this actually applies to the miniature. I've got a feeling something to do with the fact that it's a nice shiny surface, it's a very smooth surface, which is helping the flow. As for the Games Workshop Null Oil, this goes on very nicely as well, and in fact, as it's going on, I'm not 100% sure if there's going to be too much difference in the finish of this. We will obviously let it dry and then we'll have a look at it towards the end of the video and get our final thoughts on it, but in terms of this one, both are working quite nicely. Next up, we'll try the brown shade, and I'm going to pop this over some reds. Now this is going on, it doesn't seem to be dark enough in my opinion, so we'll just paint it all over. It's flowing okay over what is a less shiny surface, more of a satin finish. Now it's going into those recesses okay, but like I said right at the start, I'm not 100% convinced this is dark enough, so this may well be the wrong colour to have tried the brown shade on, but I haven't actually got anything else to use it on, so we're going to have to suck it and see. So let's compare the Agrax Earth shade. On the Agrax Earth shade going on, it is a much darker shade, so it's maybe a little more pigmented, and it is going in and hitting those recesses as expected, like it did on that first little test we did at the start of the video. So it remains to be seen how these will both dry, but right now I think Agrax has got it. We'll move on to gold and we'll use that flesh wash. Now I think this is going to be exactly the same as the silver, and this is applying really nicely and it's flowing into those recesses really nicely as well. So again, the fact that this is more of a glossy surface is really going to help the fact that the lack of surface tension is going to help the wash do its thing. As for the new formula Acryl flesh shade, we'll pop this on, and this is going on okay. It's a little bit more blotchy maybe in some places in terms of the application, but again, we let it dry fully before we do cast our final vote. Now, because that flesh went over a glossy surface, let's put it over something a little more satin. So we'll pop it over that really dodgy yellow that we've done on this marine, and we'll see how it applies and how it goes into the recesses. So the flesh wash from Pro Acryl is leaving the model a little dirty in terms of its staining, so we'll try and clean up as much of that as we can. But in terms of getting into the recesses, it's going in there, it's okay. But there is quite a high level of staining. The Acryl flesh shade, on the other hand, probably a little bit less staining and probably is doing exactly what it says on the tin. So this is working quite nicely in terms of the way it's intended, and perhaps is edging the Pro Acryl a little bit. So again, we'll have a look at them when they're completely dry before we make any final assumptions. Lastly, we'll try that black shade over something a little more matte satin as well. And the colour we're using is blue. Now this is the Pro Acryl blue through an airbrush. So it's Pro Acryl on Pro Acryl, and this is applying quite nicely, which perhaps you'd expect from products in the same stable. It does go on really well, and I'm really liking how it's getting into those recesses. As for the null oil, don't expect this to perform any less effectively because it does all the different brands paint. It is working very well. It is going into those recesses. We will let it dry again before we come to any final conclusion, but really it's probably much of muchness in terms of what we've got going on here. So with all that drama out the way, then let's go back to our first test sheet and see how the colours have done. So firstly, with the black, we can see here that the null oil from Games Workshop is the clear winner. Now, one thing I will say about the Pro Acryl black, it looks like it's gone onto a little bit of an iffy surface, which has affected the result, but I do think that Games Workshop will win it. Same for Agrax Earth Shade. This has done the job very nicely indeed. And worth mentioning, Army Painter here, it seems to have gone on pretty well as well. Pro Acryl probably coming third here. As for the Flesh Shade, again, I think Games Workshop Acryl Flesh Shade takes it. Special mention for the Army Painter. It's a little browner, but I think it's worked better. The Flesh Shade from Pro Acryl has stained the pad a little more than perhaps we would have liked. As for applying the shades on the models onto varying different colours, firstly we look at the silver. Obviously we've got the Pro Acryl on the right as you look at the screen, and the Games Workshop on the left. And honestly, this is a straight up draw over the silver. You can use either the black from Pro Acryl or the null oil from Games Workshop and you'll be happy with the result. As for the red, like I said, it was probably the wrong colour to try the brown on, but the Agrax Earth Shade has come out on top here. The brown hasn't really shaded those recesses very much at all, but the Agrax, that's done a fantastic job, so we're going to have to give it to Games Workshop on this one. Next up, we've got the gold, and very similar to the silver, because it's going on that nice surface, the finish is pretty much the same. But I am going to give this one to the Pro Acryl because I do really like the way that it is giving some nice shading to those shoulder studs. One thing to be mindful of though, you will have to just make sure it doesn't pool too much. Going over the yellow, and I think we're probably back to Games Workshop winning this one. Like I said, the base yellow on this model is not great for this experiment, but that being said, if we look at the Acryl Flesh Shade, the result is much nicer and a lot more subtle. Finally, we're looking at the blue. Now, it's the blue model with the black shade. You can see that it's a little bit wet still, so I've not let it dry fully. But I think the Pro Acryl black wash over the Pro Acryl blue has actually worked really nicely. The null oil maybe I've put too much on, but It seems to have pulled a lot worse than the black from Pro Acryl, so I'm going to give it to Pro Acryl on this occasion. So let's look at some other things we need to consider when it comes to seeing how good this range of paints are. So we've seen them on models. What about the other things? So firstly, let's look at the range itself. Now, Pro Acryl is very limited. You've got black, brown, and flesh wash, which you can do a lot with. And when you compare it to something like Games Workshop, which has got 18 shades in the range, then it does suffer a little bit in a direct comparison. Similarly, when you look at something like Army Painter, which has 10 or 11 shades in the range, again, there's a lot more choice out there than just these 3 from Pro Acryl. So we've seen it before. We've looked at the range and looked at some limitations, and I am sure Pro Acryl will release more shades in the future. Let's have a look at the cost. So the Pro Acryl costs £5.40 at recommended retail price, and that's for a 22ml bottle, which gives you a cost per mil of 25 pence. If we compare this to Games Workshop, then Games Workshop has an 18ml bottle, which is smaller. It's got an RRP of £4.75, which gives you a cost per mil of 26 pence. Now, this is very marginally more expensive than the Pro Acryl, so you have to really have a think about this and decide, is that 1 pence worth it? Now, for me, looking at those tests, if you're only using those 3 colours and you want something slightly cheaper, then go with the Pro Acryl. Otherwise, it's Citadel for me. Finally, we'll compare this with the Army Painter, and Army Painter is the big winner when it comes to cost. So it's an 18ml bottle, which is the same as Games Workshop. However, the RRP on this is £2.75, which gives you a cost per mil of 15 pence, which is 10 pence per mil cheaper than Games Workshop. So again, I'm not the biggest fan of Army Painter, but I was pleasantly surprised by how these quick shade washes actually worked on the test shoulder pads we did, and I think they do compare favourably to the Pro Acryl in some instances. So after all that testing, what are my final thoughts on these Pro Acryl washes? Well, I think they're okay. I think they're good at what they do. They're on a par with Games Workshop washes. If you already own Games Workshop washes, I wouldn't recommend you go out and buy these as well, because I don't think you're going to be getting anything in terms of a better product that will work on your miniatures. That being said, if you don't own the washes, go out, give these a go. Now, I will say that I was pleasantly surprised with the Army Painter, soft tone, dark tone, and flesh wash, but they still don't perform as well as the Citadel washes for me. So that all being said, I think they're good. I think they're okay. I'm going to stick to Citadel for now going forward. What about you? What do you think? Have you tried these washes in the past? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll be back to normal tutorials before you know it. So make sure you keep watching the channel. I'll see you next time.